sunny for the majority, certainly across the Midlands, South Wales, Eastern England. Some cloud will bubble up through the day, and there'll be some showers coming into Scotland and Northern England. But again, not really where we need the rainfall. Across the south and east, it stays dry and fine. But again, temperatures, instead of being in the high 20s like earlier this week, more likely in the low 20s, and it won't be as humid. So turning fresher and cooler, dry for many this weekend with sunny spells, may start to warm up as the weekend wears on.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. The Tory leadership race in a crucial week, as party members are now definitely receiving their ballots, just as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak set to face party members again in the latest hustings in Cardiff this evening. We'll be speaking to MPs on both sides of this debate, as it really is decision time. On Monday, 696 people made the journey in 14 boats across the English Channel, with large groups of migrants, including young children, seen brought on shore in Ramsgate. We'll be speaking to Nigel Farage about why he feels the issue is not getting as much attention in the media and in the Conservative leadership race as it should. And as Nancy Pelosi leaves Taiwan, China's promised to show force and retaliation. We'll be speaking to the chair of the parliamentary group for Taiwan, that's Colonel Bob Stewart. And here's a story to get your teeth into. A snorkeler has suffered a leg injury after reportedly being bitten by a blue shark off the coast of Cornwall. Apparently, there's been no unprovoked shark bites in British waters since 1847, when records began. What precisely has gone on there? We'll be heading to Cornwall to get the latest. And as always, do get in touch with your views. You know the email address by now. It is gbviews@gbnews.uk. Or you can tweet me at GBNews. All that and so much more between now and 4 o'clock. But first, at the top of the hour, the very latest news headlines with Simon.
Thanks, Darren. It's 2 minutes past 3 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss says the leadership race is still too close to call as she arrived in Wales ahead of tonight's hustings event. It's after a recent YouGov poll shows support for fellow candidates Rishi Sunak has dropped from 31% to 26%, while support for the Foreign Secretary has increased. Earlier today, it was announced ballot papers being sent out for the Conservative leadership election are being delayed after GCHQ warned hackers could change people's votes. Ms Truss says she's feeling confident.
I'm not taking anything for granted. There is still a long way to go in this leadership election. And what I'm about is unleashing opportunity across the United Kingdom, getting our economy growing and delivering for people all over the country.
Inflation could hit 15% next year as the cost of living crisis continues. The Resolution Foundation is warning the outlook for inflation is highly uncertain and the Bank of England is likely to forecast a higher and later peak. The independent think tank said while oil prices have fallen substantially, gas price increases were wiping out any good news. The Bank of England is expected to increase interest rates by 0.5 percentage point tomorrow, the biggest increase since 1995. Authorities in Northern Ireland have carried out a major operation targeting a suspected people smuggling ring. Around 50 officers from the government and police carried out warrants at 2 properties in Belfast. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of assisting unlawful immigration of people into the UK through the Irish Republic. The raids follow a previous Home Office investigation, which saw 2 other people arrested. Archie Battersby's parents have submitted an application to the European Court of Human Rights in a bid to postpone the withdrawal of his life support. The 12-year-old's treatment was due to end at 11 o'clock this morning unless his family submitted the application by 9 a.m. Barts Health NHS Trust says it'll make no changes to his care until the legal issues are resolved. Archie was found unconscious at his home in April and was declared brainstem dead by doctors. Speaking outside the Royal London Hospital, Archie's mother said she'll continue fighting.
If this country can't treat him or they're not willing to treat him, where is the harm in allowing him to go to another country? I promised Arch, the same with his dad, that we'll fight till the bitter end, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to fight for the right for my son to live.
The senior US politician Nancy Pelosi has left Taiwan following a controversial visit. The Speaker of the House of Representatives met with the country's president during the 24-hour trip, which has been strongly condemned by China. Earlier, Beijing said it will hold a series of live-fire military drills in the air and sea around the island from tomorrow. The country is self-ruled, but is seen as a breakaway province by China. In what is being seen as a showing of solidarity with the island, Ms. Pelosi said the US would not abandon Taiwan. The first shipment carrying food out of Ukraine has anchored in the Black Sea off Turkey's coast. The ship, which is carrying around 26,000 tons of corn to Lebanon, departed Odessa's port on Monday. It's the first ship carrying food to leave the port of Odessa since the Russian invasion. In an exclusive interview with GB News, Tobias Ellwood, the chair of the Defence Select Committee, said the cost of living crisis in the UK is directly related to Ukraine.
The cost of living crisis that we're experiencing here is directly consequential to the fact that grain cannot get out of Odessa. That is ground zero when it comes to the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, being able to feed not just its own country, but Africa and indeed Europe as well. Get that grain moving, and then grain prices, food prices then drop. That affects the cost of living. You sort out Ukraine, oil and gas prices will lower as well.
Southeast Water has become the latest supplier to announce a hosepipe ban following the driest July on record since 1935. The water supplier says it's restricting the use of sprinklers in the Kent and Sussex region from midnight on Friday the 12th of August until further notice. Southeast Water has said the demand for water this summer has broken all previous records. It follows Southern Water's hosepipe ban in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight from this Friday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to The Briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. It is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're on TV, online, and of course on your wireless radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Well, the race to be the next Conservative leader and Prime Minister continues with Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak set to face party members in the latest hustings in Cardiff this evening. It's a crucial week as Tory Prime members are now expected to receive their ballots after the vote had initially been delayed due to a warning from GCHQ about hacking Well, speaking to reporters a little bit earlier, Liz Truss again had to defend her U-turn on public sector pay reforms and was also questioned about whether the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, essentially was asking about that and about her attempt to become the next Prime Minister. Let's have a look at what she had to say.
Well, the policy that I put forward was misrepresented. And I wanted to make sure that our important frontline workers like doctors and teachers weren't worried. That's why I cancelled the policy. I did it straight away, I was decisive, and I was honest with the public about what I was doing. I'm very clear we're not proceeding with this policy. What's important to me is that we support people at this difficult economic time by reversing the national insurance rise, by getting rid of the green energy levy to save people money on their fuel bills, and that will be my focus as Prime Minister. The reality is that Wales has been let down by 20 years of Labour rule, and what I am about is about making sure we bring opportunity, investment to Wales, that we back Wales's fantastic farmers, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in the hustings tonight. I believe Mark Drakeford has not delivered for the people of Wales, and I will be holding him to account.
There you go, that's Liz Truss speaking a little bit earlier on today. She's in the crowd, of course, facing Rishi Sunak and Conservative members a little later on. Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Tom Howard, who is in the studio with me this afternoon. Tom, first of all, bit of news also emerged in the last couple of hours or so, which is that Conservative members will no longer be given a second chance in terms of wanting to change their votes. What impact do you think that might have?
Yes, it was always a bit of a peculiar quirk of this year's system, not something that had existed in previous Conservative leadership elections that went out to the members, the ability of people to submit both an online and a physical vote, and whichever came in latest would be the one that counted. Well, now the system is changing, so that when you submit your physical ballot, the online code to vote as well will be deactivated, and you will not be able to vote online. Similarly, you will not be able to put in or even access the website page with that code more than once. Once you've put it in, you're no longer able to access that website. There are all sorts of safety features that have gone in that have potentially, more consequentially than having a second vote, delayed the point at which people will start voting. Because it wasn't expected that that many people would perhaps change their vote later on. But what does matter is the point at which people get those ballots through their door, through their doors, letterboxes, onto the doormat, whatever. What matters then is that as soon as Conservative members are likely to get that, we're expecting the vast majority of people to vote. So almost an extra week of this contest has been added on before people can vote, and that could be more consequential.
I mean, in the sense, do we expect in some ways maybe the U-turn yesterday to have an impact? But when you look at the polls, you know, Rishi Sunak seems to be a long way behind. We were talking about polls yesterday, weren't we, and how reliable we are. We've got another one from YouGov, and Liz Truss has extended her lead.
She has. If you exclude Don't Knows, it's 70-30. Now, that's an extraordinary margin for her to hold, you'd expect.
It's Boris Johnson, Jeremy Hunt territory, essentially.
It really is, and you'd expect... to be fair, YouGov did slightly overestimate the level of support that Boris Johnson secured back in 2019, but when you're talking about a gap that wide, margin of error doesn't really come into it. You'd have to have an absolutely catastrophic mistake of a campaign to turn that around. And I think that Liz Truss, what she was saying earlier today about how quickly and decisively she acted on that particular U-turn, yes, not the highest moment of her campaign, not the moment that her campaign was showered in glory, but she cauterised the wound fairly quickly. I can't see that being the real turning point of this campaign that for a moment yesterday it looked like it could have been. Now, we are expecting another poll at the start of next week, this one from Opinium, so we'll be able to see if that tracks the same trend as YouGov. Of course, we saw a poll on Monday from a little-known Italian polling firm that was a lot closer, just 5 points between the two. But there were lots of caveats about that poll. They hadn't polled the Conservative Party membership before, lots of people raising an eyebrow or two at that one. It'll be interesting to see if Opinium, who have polled the Conservative Party membership before, match what YouGov say.
And we just finally, Tom, saw another announcement today from Rishi Sunak when it comes to Prevent and taking on extremism in Britain. I mean, this is not sustainable, though, is it, that the candidates can continually, day after day, come out with new initiatives with, 4 or 5 weeks to go? I mean, in many ways, despite these policy initiatives, the campaign itself seems quite cemented, if you like. It doesn't seem... I mean, what I'm trying to say is we've got another hustings in Cardiff tonight and we'll effectively see the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes, there are 12 hustings being hosted by the Conservative Party, and it's beginning to feel a bit like Groundhog Day at each of them. We've only had 2, and yet it's sort of the same sort of themes coming up again and again. I suppose this one being in Wales will have a bit of a different flavour. We've heard Liz Truss talk about Mark Drakeford, and of course there will be that Welsh flavour to it, of course taking the fight to Welsh Labour, which has done well in local elections recently. But yes, it does seem that because this is the point at which those ballots were expected to be going out, now they'll be going out at the start of next week, this is the real crunch point, the point at which it really matters to make the most noise. And if you're a campaign that's behind, like Rishi Sunak seems to be, they'll be wanting to try and grab those headlines, fill up their media grid, and the best way to do that in their minds is just continually put out policy. I'm not sure if even Rishi Sunak can remember the amount of policy that he has announced, but perhaps a little bit of respite for us, because for the first time, the first day of this campaign since it got down to these final 2, Liz Truss today didn't announce any new policy. Perhaps that's a lesson she learned from yesterday.
Indeed. Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent in the studio. Let's go to the Conservative commentator, Alex Dean, who joins us down the line this afternoon. Alex, very good afternoon to you. I mean, in many ways, are you as bored of this race as some of us have become, in the sense that we do seem to be talking about the same things day after day?
Yeah, I don't think it's boring. It's good that candidates get tested in this way, I suppose. But it is very repetitive, that's fair. And I think it's going to be even more so. I don't think people quite realise what it's going to be like. We're going to have hustings in which the majority of members have already voted. Now, of course, things will still be to play for. Of course, some people won't have voted and they'll want to watch how things go and listen to what the candidates say. But the majority of Tory voters, I think, are going to vote by return of post. So a clutch of hustings are going to take place after most people have already cast their ballots.
And at the moment, I mean, it really does seem, and we keep saying this, but it does seem like it is Liz Truss's to lose.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, in any binary contest, you're always wise to consider both options potentially succeeding. Didn't we learn that in Brexit, where many people thought that it was a done deal the other way? But it's a mountain to climb now for Rishi Sunak, and that's why his campaign, I thought Tom's analysis was spot on, that's why his campaign's making so many announcements. They're throwing lots of things up in the air and seeing what succeeds. And that tends to be a sign of a campaign that's slightly on the back foot. In the same way, Liz Truss is avoiding big media set pieces, and that's what campaigns tend to do when they think they're right out in front, and the risk of making an error is a great deal more significant than any upside from any appearance you might make.
And beyond Westminster, and indeed even the Conservative membership, what do you feel the public mood about all this is? I mean, for me, it seems that it's apathy or an entire disengagement from it. I mean, it's not exactly a kind of campaign that is infusing anywhere in Britain, I would suggest.
I don't know about that. I accept that it's not exactly the sort of thing that, fills people's evenings and they think, God, we've got to go see what's happening in this race today. But on the other hand, I would argue, and it may seem counterintuitive, I'd argue, not by design, but this has actually been pretty good for the Conservative Party, because people have been able to see an array of individuals, all of whom have got something significant to offer. On the one hand, I don't think any of the 11 who put their hands up would argue that they were the complete finished article. I think that, this is going to be some learning on the job and some application of skills whilst people really bed in as the new leader and the team around that leader. But on the other hand, I think people saw people like Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, different wings of the party, but palpably really able people who belong in government and have got something serious to offer. And I think you can say that about Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss too. And finally, it's an embarrassment of riches for the Tory party, because if you think about people like James Cleverly, you think about Priti Patel, we've got people in the Tory party who could really have been serious contenders in any other party and didn't even run. Kwasi Kwarteng, there are people who are serious heavyweight ministers who belong in government who didn't even enter this contest. And it does display, I think, a wealth of leadership in the Tory party from which the party comes out quite well.
And just very finally, Alex, I'm going to speak to Nigel Farage about this later, but we get this a lot from our viewers as well, that the situation with the small boats crisis in the English Channel hasn't really played a part in this election campaign, even though many would suggest it's a major failure of the government to be able to bring it under control. Why do you think that is? Why has migration not really played a part in the campaign?
Well, I accept your premise. I think it's one of the reasons that Priti Patel didn't run for leader, that issue has been hung around the neck of the Home Office and most particularly its Secretary of State, someone who for a long time has been the darling of the grassroots in the Conservative Party. For the avoidance of doubt, someone I think is a good minister. But it's clear that we have not succeeded yet in getting to grips with the migration of people in small boats over the Channel from France. Neither has France, for that matter, and we may wonder how hard exactly they've been trying. I think that these two candidates think to themselves, this is something they've got to get to grips with once they get into office. I think that's the way they are looking at this challenge, and I think that's got to be right. I think people think it's completely wrong that you're able to flout any kind of system or any kind of rule and just put yourself in a boat, often putting yourself in huge danger, putting other people in danger, and then demand being picked up and ferried to these shores and then being put up no matter where you've come from. In the end, Britain's a very generous country, Darren. We take a lot of refugees through the appropriate legitimate systems, and if there's an argument to take more people, I'd be very open to that. We're a generous and decent country, but you shouldn't break the law. You shouldn't be able to come here without obeying the rules, jumping the queue, and paying people smugglers thousands into the bargain. And I think that's going to be a challenge for whoever wins this contest.
OK, Tom, as always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. Alex Dean there, because I'm going to talk to Tom. That's why I'm mentioning his name. Alex, thank you. Let's talk to Tom Hunt. He is the Conservative MP for Ipswich. Good afternoon to you, Tom. You've been backing Kemi Badenoch, hadn't you? Who are you now backing in this leadership race? Have you made your mind up?
Well, I mean, it's very unusually for me. I'm sort of undecided. I think anyone who knows me knows that it's not often that I sit on a fence. It's not often that I don't have a strong view on something. I think initially when the candidates put themselves forward, I was 100% behind Kemi Badenoch. I didn't know how her campaign was going to go when I first got involved. I think it went pretty well. I mean, at one point, I thought there might be a pathway for her getting to a final two and winning the contest. I was quite disappointed when she got knocked out. I can understand why some of my colleagues felt that they wanted a candidate more experienced. Personally, though, I thought Kemi was more than capable of doing the job. So, however, we are where we are. We have two candidates before us, both of whom I think can do the job. Both have certain pluses. Some have some minuses. And I have to say, I'm sort of undecided at the moment as it stands. And I'm all ears. I'll be watching the third hustings tonight because at some point I'm going to finally have to make my decision.
You are, Tom, and my point I would put to you is, in some ways, how have you not made up your mind? Because we are now just hearing the same arguments rehearsed by the candidates over and over again. What are you hoping, in many ways, is going to happen that might well solidify your decision?
Well, I have to say, I mean, you do notice when these hustings go on and on and on that they begin to repeat themselves. And I think we've already begun to see that after the two hustings we've seen. I remember the last leadership contest, and I thought to myself, if I hear Jeremy Hunt say one more time, I want the UK to be the next Silicon Valley, I'm going to go absolutely insane. So I take your point, but I just feel I think if I go through if I look at Liz Truss, if I look at Liz and I go through issue by issue, I'm probably closer to Liz than I am to Rishi, particularly on things like immigration. But I have to say, though, I've always liked Rishi. I think he did a good job with furlough. I think he did a good job with the grants. I think there's something about his character and his personality that I personally find quite appealing. He's visited Ipswich recently and went down very well here. So I think Rishi Sunak is an appealing candidate, but I also think that Liz is. I think in some respects, perhaps Rishi's a more polished performer. But as I say, issue by issue, I think I'm probably closer to Liz. I also think there'd be something to be said for having an East Anglian MP as a Prime Minister.
Indeed, she is from your part, so her constituency is in your part of the world. Just tell me, and I was talking to Alex about this a little earlier, though, in terms of the immigration issue and how the small boats crisis hasn't really played a big part in this campaign. Well, why do you think that is? Why is it kind of been missing from the debates?
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to the sort of Channel 4 and BBC, I don't think it's really that surprising. that they're not asking that much about immigration, but they're not concerned about that as an issue. I know through my constituency correspondence that illegal immigration is one of my constituents' top concerns. Polling routinely, not just of Conservative voters and members, but also the public more generally, has immigration as a top order issue, sometimes number 3 as an issue. So yes, I agree. More needs to be asked of immigration. You know, we've got a Rwanda scheme, which sounds great, but frankly, today isn't working. We've got a situation where we're paying another £80 million to the French. We've tried it before, it hasn't worked. We've got to try something new. I think probably on illegal immigration, Elizabeth Truss is closer to where I am. I think she's left open the possibility of leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, which of course is right and proper. We cannot have a situation where unelected European judges block our ability to control our own borders and therefore be a sovereign country. So it has been discussed to some degree. I would like both candidates to be pressed more on this topic, though, for me to see whether they truly have the steel and the metal to solve this problem. And to solve this problem, they're going to have significant strength because there's going to be opposition from all over the place. At the moment, on that one particular issue, which is a very important issue, I think Liz Truss is close to where I am. But of course, there's other issues as well, such as the cost of living, that are vitally important. But as I say, I'm on the fence, and it's very unusual.
Liz Truss is appearing on GB News in a People's Forum next week. I'm sure she'll be asked about immigration and other issues, and you never know, she might help you make up your mind one way or another. Tom, as always, in Ipswich this afternoon, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Tom Hunt there, the Conservative MP. OK, it's a quick break here on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, got an interview with Tobias Ellwood on that grain that is finally leaving Ukraine on its way to Lebanon. Plus, we'll be speaking to Nigel Farage about the English boats crisis and why he feels it's not taking a major place in this Conservative leadership race. That and much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Now, the first ship carrying grain to leave the Ukrainian port of Odessa since the start of February has been cleared to continue its journey. The Razoni, which is now on its way to Lebanon, was allowed to leave Ukraine after a deal by Kyiv and Moscow aimed at alleviating the global food crisis. Well, our political correspondent, Tom Howard, has been speaking to Tobias Ellwood. He's the Conservative chair of the Defence Select Committee, and he revealed why he was allowed, you may remember this controversy, to vote for Penny Mordaunt to be the Conservative leader, despite losing the whip last month. But we did stop by asking him on the situation in Odessa and when he thought this deal between Russia and Ukraine to export grain will actually manage to hold in the weeks and months to come.
Let's just connect the two big questions that you put to me today, which is domestic and now Ukraine, because they are interrelated. The cost of living crisis that we're experiencing here is directly consequential to the fact that grain cannot get out of Odessa. That is ground zero when it comes to the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine being able to feed not just its own country, but Africa and indeed Europe as well. Get that grain moving, and then grain prices, food prices then drop. That affects the cost of living. You sort out Ukraine, oil and gas prices will lower as well. But there isn't a general plan. Absolutely, we're supporting the Ukrainian people and the armed forces. Britain is doing more so than other countries, absolutely. But there isn't a clear plan as to how we stand up to Russia, that is weaponizing grain. So this plan that's just been agreed in Turkey, I'm afraid Russia's calling the shots. It's their agenda. And what I discovered in Odessa is actually there's appetite for a UN General Assembly resolution. Let's get a coalition of the willing to actually guard the maritime passage so that we control those shipping lanes, not Russia. My concern is that once about 70 ships that got caught up in Odessa prior to the start of the war, once they've departed with their grain, then Russia will have its sights on Odessa. For a long term, they wanted to actually take that city. It was part of the original Russia Empire. That's where I think their campaign after Odessa will head next. We've gained confidence. We're getting better at supporting Ukraine, but it's coming very, very late in the day. And let's recognize we still see NATO sitting on its hands. This most formidable, potent military alliance the world has ever seen. There's a fire in Ukraine and we won't put it out. And my concern is that fire will spread beyond Ukraine and we really will have to wake up. There's always risk when you take on an adversary, but there's also risk in doing nothing, allowing Russia to then not expand just in Ukraine, but where does it head to next? Prior to going to Odessa, I was in Moldova, next door, not part of NATO, very small country, very limited armed forces. They feel very, very vulnerable indeed. Look what's going on in Bosnia right now and in Kosovo. The stability in Eastern Europe is very precarious indeed. Why? Because Putin has recognized after our humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan that this is his moment. He's backed up by China, don't forget. I see those two coalescing, this axis of Russia and China dominating the next 10, 20, 30 years. There is a danger when it comes to leaving Ukraine on its own and not leaning into it more. Not necessarily boots on the ground. There are many ways, operationally, strategically, that we can support Ukraine. Let's not forget, we've got the head of the British Army here in the UK saying this is a 1937 moment. Look what happened there when we blinked.
This week we saw an American strike in Kabul, in the heart of Afghanistan, taking out the leader of Al-Qaeda. What does this say about the Western withdrawal from that area?
President Biden would be pretty pleased to be able to take out somebody that was directly involved in that attack on the USS Cole in the 80s, on 9/11 as well. Pivotal, one of the architects in some of the challenges that we've been facing over the last couple of decades in countering terrorism. But ultimately, it also reflects the perhaps futility of us walking away from Afghanistan, the way that the Taliban is now back in cahoots with Al-Qaeda. That's why we went into the country in the first place, to actually defeat Al-Qaeda. And here they are growing again, becoming a potent force, once regrouping, rearming, retraining. That's what we're seeing, and taking advantage of a safe haven of Afghanistan. Now, they can do this over the horizon ops, if you like, as they did with the CIA drone strike, but you can't do that and actually kill this ideology. I think Osama bin Laden, I'm afraid, would probably be pleased to see that since his creation of Al-Qaeda in the 1980s, that ethos, that philosophy, that extremism has now spread across the world, mostly in Africa now, certainly in the Middle East, back in Afghanistan, causing problems for the West itself. We still don't have an answer, 20 odd years after 9/11, as to how to deal with somebody who then believes when they're indoctrinated, that they're willing to take their lives thinking they're going to get a fast track to paradise because some extremist tells them that.
On a diplomatic level, how should the United Kingdom government engage with the Taliban?
So I went out to meet the Taliban leadership in Doha in Qatar, where they have their main international base. I did this a year ago, and it was very clear to me that they said privately that they hadn't got the ability to run a country. No chance whatsoever. We should recognize them. It's our fault that we handed power to them. Our perhaps hesitance in wanting to support the Taliban means the 40 million people that we've abandoned are now seriously suffering because of famine, food shortages and so forth.
Just finally, would that not risk legitimising this terrorist-adjacent state actor, legitimising and indeed funding the very people who put our way of life at risk?
That is the awful truth, the inconvenient problem that you then face. But whose problem is that? Ours. We abandoned Afghanistan. We walked away. We handed it back to the very insurgents that we went in to defeat. We've only got ourselves to blame there. We really need to wake up. We're entering very, very difficult times now, and there is simply not the international leadership. It really is like 1937. Absence of international institutions to hold errant nations to account, countries rearming, authoritarianism on the rise, and no leadership. No Roosevelt, there's no Churchill there on the horizon to grasp this.
There you go, that was Tobias Elwood speaking to Tom a little bit earlier on. Coming up in the next couple of minutes, or the next 30 minutes, we've got Nigel Farage on the migration crisis, we've got Colonel Bob Stewart on Taiwan, and sharks in Cornwall. That between now and 4, but first, here's the very latest news headlines. It's back to Simon.
Thanks, Darren. It's 3:34. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss says the leadership race is still too close to call as she arrived in Wales ahead of tonight's hustings event. It's after recent YouGov poll shows support for fellow candidate Rishi Sunak has dropped from 31% to 26%, while support for the Foreign Secretary has increased. Earlier today, it was announced ballot papers were being sent out for the Conservative leadership election are being delayed after GCHQ warned hackers could change people's votes. Ms Truss has said she's feeling confident ahead of the vote.
I'm not taking anything for granted. There is still a long way to go in this leadership election. And what I'm about is unleashing opportunity across the United Kingdom, getting our economy growing and delivering for people all over the country.
Archie Batterby's parents have submitted an application to the European Court of Human Rights in a bid to postpone the withdrawal of his life support. The 12-year-old's treatment was due to end at 11 o'clock this morning unless his family submitted the application by 9 a.m. Archie was found unconscious at his home in April and was declared brainstem dead by doctors. Inflation could hit 15% next year as the cost of living crisis continues. The Resolution Foundation think tank is warning the outlook for inflation is highly uncertain. Meanwhile, the Bank of England is expected to increase interest rates by 0.5 percentage point tomorrow, the biggest increase since 1995. Just Stop Oil protesters have been served with a national highways injunction, which covers the M25, for blocking major roads. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, tweeted the demonstrators could face a fine or imprisonment if they breach it, blocking roads again. He said he won't stand by while lives are put at risk and roads are ground to a halt. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're on TV, online, and, of course, on your wireless radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Do get in touch, by the way, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews, particularly about this story that we're going to cover now, because, as you may know, over 700 migrants crossed the English Channel into the UK yesterday in a single day. It is the record-breaking number for the year so far. Some 696 made the journey in 14 boats on Monday, with large groups of migrants, including young children, seen being brought on shore in Ramsgate. So far, though, in the Conservative leadership contest, it's fair to say that it really hasn't had a look in, this story, at all. Now, why is that? Why has what is, frankly, a major story and something that has dominated politics over the last year or so, not really dominated this Conservative leadership race? Well, joining me in the studio is our very own Nigel Farage, who knows Ramsgate and Kent and that part of England very well indeed. Why, Nigel? Why has it not been?
Because they both agree that they're going to do nothing. They talk about Rwanda.
Yeah, which has achieved nothing.
Fact, yes, I think Liz Truss said it'll be Rwanda times 10. Well, 10 times naught is naught. So it doesn't really do very much. To get to the heart of this, there are two problems. One is the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, backed up by the European Court of Human Rights, who, of course, vetoed that plane taking off to Rwanda the other week. That's point one. Point two is the United Nations, a whole series of declarations that we're signed up to, including the 1951 definition of a refugee, which is very out of date. And whilst UN declarations that we sign don't have force of law, they're used by judges when it comes to looking at cases. And we will not solve any of this until we have sovereign control over our borders, which, incidentally, is what Brexit voters thought they were voting for. And for the Tories, look at the red wall seats. It's the number 2 issue in the red wall seats, behind, obviously, cost of living. And neither of these candidates differs from each other in any way at all. The crisis, the problem, will continue.
But also, isn't the honest answer to this as well, that even if those planes could take off to Rwanda, it still is a bit of a guess that would act as a deterrent, isn't it? Because Rwanda have also turned around in the last couple of weeks and saying, well, actually, we can only really take 200.
Yeah, 200, exactly.
I mean, you would need tens of thousands.
I showed last night on GB News TikTok coverage from the last week, advertising the date the boat was going to leave, the price. Then they had the audacity to put up summer sale. Summer sale! Only $3,500 now to cross the English Channel. Nothing will stop this. unless we take an Australian-style solution. Tony Abbott was the Aussie PM 10 years ago. He literally towed the boats back to Indonesia and said, off you go, get on with it. The trade stopped. Unless we're prepared to get genuine sovereignty, and I'm talking about Brexit 2.0, a proper Brexit, completing Brexit, it won't stop.
In saying that, though, with Tony Abbott's solution to this, he did have to work with the Indonesians. Now, he gave them a load of money, didn't he, with these boats? I mean, do you accept, though, that
we've given the
solution...
French, we've given the French
well, we do need
huge
to work with the
sums of money already. And we've reached a point with this where we can't work with the French. They refuse to sign a returns policy. You know, we're going to have to act in a very tough way. If we do that, the French will scream, the EU will scream, there'll be the threat of a trade war. You can see it all a mile off. But ultimately, unless we stop people paying traffickers 4,000 or 5,000 quid to cross the English Channel, this trade will continue.
What would you say to... Because I've talked to Anne Whitcombe about this before, of course, the Home Office Minister. No one who's soft on migration, I think she could be accused of. She says ID cards are the solution to this.
No, pointless, utterly pointless. Look, we filmed in May for GB News exclusively. I was out in my channel, you know, with Mark White, our Home Affairs and Security Editor. We filmed them as they crossed the 12-mile line into British waters, throwing their iPhones into the sea and their documents. We filmed it. Never been filmed before. If you were a legitimate refugee, why would you do that? They turn up, we've no idea who they are, we've no idea where they're from, and now we've learned that hundreds are absconding, and in many cases, before we've even collected any biometric data on them. This is madness. And it's such a big issue in the Red Wall. This issue alone could cost the Conservatives the next election. And yet, I don't see with Truss and Sunak the courage to deal with it.
Well, as I say, GB News is having the People's Forum next week with Liz Truss. Undoubtedly, I think this issue will come up. What do you think about the Conservative leadership race, though? I mean, frankly... I get paid to do this. I'm a bit bloody bored of it, if I'm honest.
I mean, a 6-week process. Now we learn the ballots will be delayed by a couple of days because the crackpot idea you could change your vote online is now open to, fraud and all
Was that the
sorts
Conservatives
of...
changing the goalposts, or...
Well,
a ridiculous idea in the first place.
It could be, but the whole idea was stupid anyway. I mean, if they can't organise a ballot, how can they run the country? We're bored with it. We know Liz Truss is miles ahead. It's pretty much all over. I think by the end of next week, then it's done. There's another week to go.
Is there anything Rishi can do now, or is it just it's too...
I don't think so. I think Truss has made the right noises in many areas. Whether she can deliver on any of it, I don't know. She is accident-prone. She is risk-prone, even more than Boris Johnson. Her statements on whether it's the Brits fighting in Ukraine, whether it's the comments on China. She is a full-blown accident waiting to happen. Dominic Cummings called her the human hand grenade. That's how she'll be. Now, in a funny way, given that the Conservatives look pretty doomed at the moment, maybe they need someone who's going to spice. So I would, if I was a Conservative member, which I haven't been for a very long time, I'd vote for her, not Rishi. But I wouldn't do so in full confidence that she can really grip this issue. And a point that was made to me at lunch by a veteran journalist, she's been in the cabinet for 12 years, and yet she's still virtually unknown
to most people
by
out
the
there.
great British public. So she hasn't made a great impact.
And just finally on all of this, and isn't that the problem that whether it's Liz or whether it's Rishi, whoever takes over, the next 18 months are going to be difficult for the Prime Minister, for the country, for all of us. Let's be honest about this. It's going to be a pretty rocky 18 months.
Very rocky 18 months. And I think what people are looking for from both parties is a vision for where we're going. Not just crisis management. We'll give you this money or that money.
Because you can get through a rocky period if you think it's going somewhere.
But there's no vision. And the cost of living, in particular energy, I think will be the dominant issue from September through to Christmas of this year. And nowhere do I hear we're going to become self-sufficient in energy. The government's going to invest in energy production. We're going to give you the cheapest energy prices and not the most expensive in Europe. Nowhere do I hear this vision. And they've got that against the net zero vision that Boris Johnson introduced, that both candidates want to stick to. And if they could solve the energy problem in the eyes of the public, make us think that unlike Germany, we're not going to get rationing of hot water, which is happening in German cities already. If one or other party could make us believe that and give us a vision, they would be miles ahead in the polls. And at the moment, the Tories can't do it, and Starmer can't do it either.
And just very quickly, 7 o'clock tonight, back on air.
7 o'clock tonight,
what's going
back on air. We've got an exclusive report about British war widows not getting their pensions because they've remarried, a campaign we're launching here on GB News. And we'll look at blue shark attacks on divers in Cornwall.
We're going to be doing that a
It's
little
got to be August. It's got to be August.
It is. It's definitely a very August. I'd love to say it's a silly season story, but according to the guy who got bitten, I'm sure it's not.
The worst shark attack in British waters since 1847.
Incredible. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. We'll be tuning in at 7 o'clock tonight. Nigel Farage there. Let's move on now, because the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has pledged America's crucial solidarity with Taiwan in an historic meeting with Taiwan's president, who vowed not to back down in the face of military threats from China. Now, China's government has reacted to Pelosi's visit with outrage. After her arrival, its military announced joint air and sea drills near Taiwan beginning on Tuesday night, and included testing launches of conventional missiles in the sea east of Taiwan. Where does this all leave us? Should Nancy Pelosi have gone there in the first place? Well, let's speak to Colonel Bob Stewart. He is the co-chair of the British Taiwanese All-Parliamentary Party group on all of this. Bob, as always, pleasure to see you. What do you make about this visit from the House of Representatives Speaker? You know what, it seems that the White House were advising her not to go. She went anyway. Was it a wise move?
I think it's a very good move. Wise, I'm not going to answer that because I don't really know how wise it is, but I think it's a good move. I think we've got to actually do a lot more to support Taiwan. I mean, at the moment, Western countries, that includes the United Kingdom, can't even won't take their naval vessels into Taiwan. That's wrong. We sent a sort of carrier force around Taiwan. Most of it went to the east of Taiwan rather than the west through the Taiwanese Strait to avoid offending China. Sorry, China. Taiwan is an independent country. They all want to remain independent. They do not want to go back to China, and we in the West should support such a thriving democracy, which is such a success.
When you say support, the big question is, isn't it, how far does that support go?
Well, what you're implying is, would we go to war over Taiwan? I don't know that we would. I mean, it's very interesting that Japan has said quite recently that, what happens in Taiwan is of crucial concern to them, and implied, military action may come. The Chinese, for their part, are actually gearing up their armed forces, possibly to do an assault against Taiwan. That would be appalling. The Americans are saying, we'll stand by Taiwan. What does that mean? Does that mean they would go to war for Taiwan? Would we? I mean, it's a long way away, I agree. But frankly, if we are not more bellicose, the Chinese will push and push and push. They want Taiwan back within the fold of China, and they want it within the Chinese president's term.
And isn't that where the parallels in some ways with Ukraine, Bob, come from, in the sense that, those kind of bellicose voices were not there for a long time over the last decade, which seemed to embolden Vladimir Putin. And the sense is, if it's not there with Taiwan, then Xi Jinping will reach the same conclusion that clearly the Russian president did.
Well, to be honest, there's been continual pressure on Taiwan over the last 10 years, continual, because I've watched it, because I've been chair of the group in Parliament for a long time, and I have visited Taiwan. By the way, if the Chinese were to invade Taiwan, my goodness, I hope they're not that silly, but if they were to do that, it would not be a walkover, I can tell you. The Taiwanese would fight quite hard. They do not want to be taken over by the Chinese. When I was in Beijing a couple of years ago, I did stand up in the foreign ministry and suggest that perhaps China ought to look at Taiwan as a model as to the way it should change and become more commercial and more democratic. That did not go down very well, I can tell you.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff, isn't it? And as they say, in many ways, Bob, that Taiwan itself is a kind of natural fortness to a large degree. I mean, there would be a massive element of risk for China in its invasion. Just very finally and quickly, if you can, what does this say about kind of British-Chinese relations, though? I mean, we had, of course, that golden period, or the so-called golden period, about 10 years ago. They're pretty fraught at the moment, let's be honest about that, aren't they?
Well, they're pretty fraught because the Chinese don't keep their word. I mean, they've not behaved honourably with regard to Hong Kong. They're actually behaving dishonourably with regard to human rights in the rest of their population. And frankly, we can't trust them. They spy against our industries and they try and steal our intellectual capital all the time. So frankly, I don't think the Chinese are people that we can do business with. We have to, but I don't like the idea.
Colonel Bob Stewart, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's say the Conservative MP, Colonel Bob Stewart, who's also the co-chair of the Parliamentary Group on Taiwan. Now, let's end on a pretty dramatic story, a pretty unusual story. That is that a snorkeler has been rescued by the Coast Guard after being bitten by a shark off the coast of Cornwall. Yes, the female swimmer was near Penzance when her leg was injured on Thursday. The snorkeler said that although the bite was a very scary incident, she does not want it to tarnish the reputation of an already persecuted species, i.e. the shark. The Coast Guard confirmed it's believed that the injury was caused by a suspected bite. Well, joining me now from Cornwall is Constable Martin Alvey and James Wright, who is from the Sea Life Centre here in London. Very good afternoon to you both. Martin, let's start with you. What are the details of this? As I say, this I think is the first shark bite we've seen of the coast of Britain in 150-odd years.
Yes, so as I understand it, this lady was bitten by what we think was a blue shark about 15 miles off the coast of Cornwall, so near the coast of Penzance. She was a member of a party that was actually paying to go out to swim with sharks out off the coast. So this tour boat goes out, the participants don wetsuits and snorkels. They put what's called chum in the water, so that's mashed up mackerel and herrings or other oily fish to attract the sharks. And then they have an experience of going in there and actually swimming with them. So it certainly wasn't off one of our beaches, it was way out to sea. And as I say, the sharks were attracted to the swimmers, and it just seemed unfortunate that one of them took a nibble at her leg. But from what we understand, it wasn't so much an attack as probably a bit more innocent than has been made out.
OK, well, that's reassuring for us all, and reassuring that it wasn't, as you say, on the beaches around Cornwall. James, let's bring you in. A blue shark. What is a blue shark, and how common are they around the coast of Britain?
So blue sharks are they're an ocean-going oceanic species, so they'll actually migrate between different areas of the world. So they'll come into UK waters in the summer, and especially around sort of the southwest peninsula where it is a little bit warmer. They'll be around a bit longer. As has just been mentioned there, this incident did occur quite some distance off the shore. People, I suppose, if they hear the term snorkeler, they're thinking about when they may have gone on holiday to the Mediterranean and gone off snorkeling off the beach. This actually is more like an open water experience where they've gone out and they've gone to the area where these sharks are more likely to occur, and then the chance of the sort of meeting with the snorkelers and the sharks has been increased by baiting them in with the scent of food.
And this is all pretty rare, isn't it? Is there any sign that kind of contact between, as in she purposely went there to see sharks? So it's unlikely that anyone around Britain, James, is going to encounter sharks anytime soon.
No, you'd be extremely lucky. I would probably say to use the word attack in this is actually incorrect. It's not an attack. I suppose the best analogy I could use is if you've got a pet dog and you're playing with it and you've got it excited and it's lunged for a toy and it's caught your hand by mistake instead of the toy. It's almost like that. The shark has detected the chum. It can smell food in the water. It's come to investigate. The only thing in the water it's finding is snorkelers, and unfortunately the activity around it has probably just just made it have a little bit of a bite to explore what was there, and straight away realised, oh, that's not. These are species that we refer to as piscivorous, so they eat fish and squid. So they're not taking on large mammal prey like some of the sort of sharks you'd get in other parts of the world.
And just Martin, in one word, she is fit and healthy. She's all good, is she?
From what we understand, yes, she was able to actually walk off the boat. Is fairly sanguine about the whole experience, from what we understand. Yes, I think she had a nasty injury that needed hospital treatment, but certainly nothing physically life-changing.
Okay, great stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Martin and James there joining us down the line.
Thank you.
That's it from me for today. I'm not here tomorrow. Tom Harwood will be sitting in from 3. Up next, Colin Brazier from 4 to 6. We'll leave you, though, with the weather. Have a very nice afternoon.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. The heat and humidity is easing, turning cooler and fresher, but if you're after rainfall across the south, it's not good news. It's staying largely dry. This weather front is introducing the slightly fresher conditions overnight, and we do have some showers coming in across parts of Scotland and some heavier rain for a time across Northern Ireland during this evening. That weather front across the south not providing much in the way of rainfall, just a few showers here and there. And later in the night, we could see some heavier rain across parts of eastern Scotland. Generally, it is turning cooler. Still quite warm and humid this evening, but by dawn we should be down to 14, 15 degrees across the southeast, and generally cooler and fresher conditions already arriving elsewhere. Some wet weather, though, early on across eastern Scotland on Thursday. It may take a while to clear away. A few showers drifting across northern England and North Wales, particularly in the morning. They should tend to fade during the afternoon. Some showers keeping going across northern and western Scotland. The odd one for Northern Ireland, but again in the south it is mostly dry and bright with sunny spells, but it won't be as humid as recent days. A fresher feel, but we could still get up to 25 Celsius across the southeast. Still a few showers across northern Scotland during Thursday evening. 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland, blown in on a fresh northwesterly breeze. Elsewhere, most places dry, perhaps 1 or 2 showers coming into northwest England as we start Friday. Friday, again, looking fine and sunny for the majority, certainly across the Midlands, South Wales, eastern England. Some cloud will bubble up through the day, and there'll be some showers coming into Scotland and northern England. But again, not really where we need the rainfall. Across the south and east, it stays dry and fine. But again, temperatures, instead of being in the high 20s like earlier this week, more likely in the low 20s, and it won't be as humid. So turning fresher and cooler, dry for many this weekend with sunny spells, may start to warm up as the weekend wears on.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need